Hey everybody, this is Pierre Quinn and you're listening to the Leading While Green podcast, where my mission is to help you live, learn, and lead with confidence. Here on episode number 1 of the podcast, I'll give you some background into the Leading While Green project, what you can expect from this podcast, what I'm doing to overcome one of my major fears, some highlights from my second conference, and 5 must-haves for life change. So listen up. So this is episode number 1 of this podcast, and I'm super excited to be coming to you in this format. You can check out more about me on my blog, www.pierre.quinn.com. Now, do people even say www anymore? I know that used to be a thing. Maybe we've just totally forgotten about that and people already know what to do when they go to the web. Anyway, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a pastor. My passions center around leadership and communication. And for a few years, I've been doing the whole leadership speaking thing, traveling around the country, talking to college students, to nonprofits, to faith-based organizations, to associations and corporations about leadership, communication, and life balance. And every time I do a talk or a seminar or a keynote, people ask, where can we find more about you? Where can we hear more of your stuff? Do you have a podcast out that we can listen to? And I would always say, no, I'm working on it. So this is the getting past the idea of working on it and actually doing it. And I don't know how many of you have been there before. You got tons of ideas in your head, things that you want to accomplish, plans that you make, but you never get around to implementing. So this podcast is about me implementing some of the great ideas that have been on my mind for the past couple of years. The truth is, this is my second podcast. I tried to do it a couple of years ago, fairly successful. Had about 10 podcast episodes, if you could call that success. But I interviewed some pretty notable people in the industry of leadership and mentoring and finance, and it was pretty cool. It just wasn't consistent with it. So we're going to work on our consistency thing for this particular podcast. 2015 was the year that I self-published my book, Leading While Green: How Emerging Leaders Can Ripen into Effective Leaders. And I've been on such a wild ride after publishing that book. The conferences I've been able to speak at, the keynote presentations, the workshops, being able to travel, talk to college students, talk to corporate leaders, talk to nonprofit leaders, leaders of faith-based institutions. And it's been incredible. Just one self-published book has opened so many doors, and I really recommend that everybody publishes a book. You can check out my book on my site, pierrequinn.com, and let me know what you think. And even if you respond to this podcast, you never know. If you drop your mailing address, I may just put a copy of the book in the mail for you, free of charge. But that's if you hit me up and respond to the podcast. And reviews are the thing for this whole podcast thing. So leave me a review on iTunes and even some suggestions on what you would want to hear from the leadership, communication, life balance space. And we're going to be looking at all of our topics through those lenses. If it's parenting, if it's interpersonal relationships, if it's entrepreneurship and business, it's going to come through that leadership, life balance lens. So I'm super excited just to be talking to you about this up early in the morning, recording this. I think that's when I have the best just brain power and imagination and really energy for this thing. So I'm glad to be up. So what can you expect from this particular podcast? We'll mix it up. We'll do some interviews sometimes with some influencers and just people who are my friends, who have knowledge and experience, who always drop nuggets whenever I have conversations with them. So we'll mix it up and have some of my friends, some notable people maybe you know across industries, some emerging leaders, some up and up and coming influencers. We'll mix it in. Sometimes it'll just be me sharing some tips and some insights from my experience, much like you'll get today on the podcast. But it's going to be incredible. And hey, if you have things that you want to hear or people that you want to hear from, I'll try to reach out to them as well based on some of your suggestions and recommendations. So I wanted to start off this particular podcast talking about this idea of fears and one of my major fears. And some of our fears really just cripple us. Some of us are afraid of the dark. Some of us are afraid of success. So we have tremendously great ideas, but we kind of take a step back in terms of implementation because we don't know if we can handle the success that may come from getting those ideas off the ground and doing what we're supposed to do. Some of us fear what other people think about us. And maybe there's a whole bunch of trauma, things that happen in our childhood that's associated with that. But fear is a thing that it's a thing that just cripples us. And for the longest time, I've been afraid of this whole swimming thing. I tell people I grew up as an inner city kid, and on my side of town, there was a community center with a basketball court, but there were no swimming pools. So I didn't grow up with an affinity toward water. I never learned how to swim. I'm not sure if my parents can even swim. Most people in my family don't swim. I think my cousin learned how to swim because he was a Marine, and they just threw him in the water until he figured out what to do. Or at least that's the story that everybody tells. I'm not quite sure if besides that anybody else in my family swims or swims well, because there's a lot of people who say, well, I can swim, but I choose not to, or I can swim. I was at the pool one day and a lady said, well, I can swim, but I'm just choosing not to. I'm gonna walk today. And I said, okay, sure. I mean, I didn't have anything to prove. So I'm in the pool because this is my second swim lesson and I'm taking swim lessons to overcome my fear of swimming. I don't really have a fear of water. I kind of have a fear of drowning, a fear of not knowing what to do in the water, but I don't necessarily have a fear of water. As a kid, when we would go to the beach and play around in the water, I would just try to stick my head underwater for as long as I could, holding my breath for as long as I could and just look around, even though I couldn't swim. So I have that really in the back of my mind. So I don't have a general fear of water. I do have a fear of drowning. Like I do have a fear of drowning, but I got a great swim coach. And probably by the time some of you listen to this, I'll be on my third swim lesson. And I feel like he hit me with the okie doke. Like that first swim lesson, I was in the water and it felt like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And I was getting the handle of it, getting the hang of it, and it was working okay. But by the time we got to that second swim lesson, I was just like, man, I have no idea what I'm doing. So the swim coach that I'm working with, and he owns a business, him and his brother, and they have a staff of swim coaches, and their specialty is infant swim rescue, infant swim response, ISR. I can't remember what those acronyms mean, but really they teach infants. They teach babies how to swim. And I remember being at the pool and watching this baby crying and swimming at the same time on its back, kicking, splashing, swimming on top of the water. And I'm thinking, man, I'm 36 years old and this baby who can't even talk is out swimming me. And I was thinking, if my swim coach can teach a baby how to swim and the baby can't even talk, but the baby is not drowning in the water, on top of the water swimming, then he should be able to teach me. So this wrestling with this fear, really to overcome it, I'm looking to work with someone who has had success in getting other people through the fear of the same thing that I'm trying to tackle. And it's humbling. Sometimes it's rough. I spent 30 minutes one day in the pool just practicing how to kick because I don't know how to kick. Something happens in the pool and my coordination is off and my legs sometimes hit each other and I can't get them up high enough. So I spent 30 minutes on the side of the pool just kicking, holding on to the side of the pool, just kicking. It was a really humbling experience, and people all around, people younger than you. I'm watching kids just jump into the water and splash. But my personal journey means that I have to start from where I am and do what I can to move forward. And it's the same thing for all of us. Some of our fears, especially that fear of success, it's best for us to find somebody who has already wrestled with the thing that we're afraid of, and work with someone who has coached others through that fear. So what's your fear? Let me know. Drop me a line and let me know what your fear is. I'd love to talk to you about it, and let me know what you're doing to overcome those fears. So related to this idea of fear of success, I had my second conference. Now, I know if you look on social media, if you like on Facebook and Instagram, everybody's doing a conference, and a conference about everything. And you have major industry conferences, you have major association conferences where people are spending thousands of dollars to come for 3 or 4 or 5 days to hear a set of speakers and receive the tools that they need to get whatever it is off the ground. And then you also have people who it's just them and 5 other people in a coffee shop or in a basement or some office complex that they've rented, some office conference room that they rented, and they call that a conference. So whatever it is can be called a conference. There's no monopoly on the word. But I gave my second conference. So my first conference was in 2016 after I published Leading While Green, How Emerging Leaders Can Ripen into Effective Leaders. I decided to have a conference based on the principles that I shared in the book. And I was living in the city of Bowling Green, Kentucky at the time, the home of Western Kentucky University, where one of the Corvette plants are. And Corvette was a major thing down in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I decided to have a conference based on my book and put out the advertisements, talk to people in the city. And for that first event, we had about 50, close to 60 people in the room. Asked 2 other people to join me, 2 other young leaders in the city to join me. And we had a great time just sharing leadership principles and insights from our lives for half a day. It was a half a day conference, really amazing. People asking when we're going to do it again. I had all these plans to travel with it and really just build it up and make it a part of my brand and my package and my platform with an emphasis on leadership. But I do what a lot of us do when we experience success. My follow-up wasn't great. I tried to do it in another city. I think I tried to do it in Nashville, but my response wasn't that great. And sometimes what happens when you succeed or you have a small amount of success, that small amount of success can jade you or it can even cripple you. So I didn't put the effort into it the second time that I put into it the first time. And part of it is because I'm an ideator. I don't know if you've taken Strengths Quest or Strengths Finder. If you haven't, I suggest that you do. It's about $10, the Strengths Finder assessment. And I took Strengths Finder. My top strength, I thought it was going to be communication, but my top strength is ideation. I love coming up with ideas. And the truth is, after I get the idea out, after I get it on paper, after we're at the beginning stages of implementation, I'm really on to something else, because for me, I get my juices going. My synaptic nerve endings firing. My excitement comes from the ideas, from generating the ideas, not necessarily the implementation. So I dropped the ball, never did a second Leading While Green conference, even though we had such success with the first one. And we'll work on it. We'll retool it. Got a team that I'm working with, and we'll retool that thing and bring it back. Well, I wrote a devotional book called Revision, and you can check that out on my blog as well, my website as well. I wrote a 21-day devotional guide called Revision, and I used it for my church, a church that I pastor in the Washington, D.C. area. And the idea of revision was for our congregation to take a look at the areas of our lives where we're being called to dream, to imagine, and to plan again. So we had a 21-day devotional guide. I had a teaching series called Revision that I actually been using all of 2017. We had a phone call, 21-day phone devotional, encouragement, spiritual motivation in the morning. and it was working real well. And we had people going back to school. We had people losing weight. We had people changing the dynamics of their relationships, people writing books, people starting businesses, and individuals would come to me and say, "Hey, when are you going to start a workshop or a seminar or some kind of class around these principles of life change that you have shared in the devotional book, that you've shared in the teaching series, that you've shared in the church?" And I just kind of just threw it by the wayside. I said, I'm thinking about it. And I really didn't have anything on paper. But by the time the eighth person asked me, the eighth person said, "Yo, what are you going to put this thing together?" And I said, okay, maybe I should, because this is, the eighth person. And I think it was Dan Miller from the 48 Days brand. Dan Miller says, anytime three people ask you a question, or come to you with comments about a similar idea, it's probably a good idea to make something, a product or service around that. So I got a poster board and jotted down some notes. And then I sat on the notes because I was afraid. I was afraid of failure. I was afraid that people would not come, that people would say, well, you're not supposed to do stuff like this. Just all types of irrational stuff. But finally, I had two friends who kicked me in the pants and say, "Hey, we got to do this thing. Let's make it happen." And on July 16th of 2017, we had the Revision Conference. We had an amazing team of speakers. All of them were entrepreneurs, and some of them were working 2 and 3 jobs. They had a job and a side hustle. And it was a great cast. We had media producers, we had professional photographers, we had speakers and leadership trainers, coaches, we had therapists. They were all part of our speaking team, and it was a great experience. And we had about 50 people in the room for that Revision Conference, just brainstorming around areas of our lives where we felt like we're being called to dream, to imagine, to plan again, and to make a difference in the world. And it was about a half a day, really intense, just really a passionate, emotional conference about overcoming our fears, about life change, about making plans, about collaboration, about moving forward. And the first one was amazing. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to let what happened to Leading While Green happen to the Revision Conference. So we're going back at it again, October 29th in Baltimore, where we're having the second stop on the Revision Tour. I don't know if it's an official tour yet, but we're having the second stop on the Revision Tour at the University of Maryland, Baltimore campus. And you can check that out on my website, prcquinn.com, or you can go to Revision 2017, revision2017.eventbrite.com, and you can check out information about the Revision Conference. You want to check that out now because we have some early bird pricing for our VIP, which is going to be intense, and our main session. And you're just going to love the experience of brainstorming, of networking with like minds. There'll be entrepreneurs in the room. There'll be ministry leaders in the room. There'll be individuals who want to write a book in the room, who want to start a project in the room, just who have a general sense that something is wrong and that something needs to change. People looking to improve their relationships. This idea of revision is any area where you feel called to make a change, any area that you feel called to dream, imagine, and plan again, because the principles of life change are basically the same, no matter what area of life that you're looking at. So join us for the Revision Conference, revision2017.eventbrite.com, and check out the early bird pricing. We want you in the building for this event. We want you in the building for this conference. And what I learned from this second conference that I did was there's such a value in team. The first time around, I was doing everything on my own, trying to make everything happen on my own. And we had a modicum of success. But when it was time to transition to that next event, that next conference, because I hadn't established a solid team that I was really depending on and collaborating with, it just didn't work out. So I learned the lessons for the value of team and allowing everyone to operate in their giftedness And we had such an awesome team of speakers. I think I spoke twice in short increments because the talks are about 20 minutes each. And we had some people, some home run hitters on the team, home run hitters who are incredible speakers, and just being okay with the idea if someone comes to a conference, even though it's a conference that I'm putting on and that I'm hosting, that maybe they won't get what they came for from my presentation. Maybe they'll get it from somebody else. Maybe they'll get it from the networking or from a conversation at the table. But as long as I've been in a position to help facilitate or help put them in a place where they can begin to make the steps toward change, then I've done my job, and you need an amazing team to do that. Now, one of the things that we talked about at the conference is this idea of life change. And life change, man, just thinking about changing your life, in some ways it's exhilarating because you look at your life and say, I really don't want to do this anymore. But then in some form or fashion, you look at your life and you say that you don't want to do this anymore, this pattern, this routine, this series of habits that you're in. But you are afraid because you're thinking, change. This is not my thing. I'm not sure that I want to change. It's scary thinking about change. It's overwhelming thinking about change. I'm used to the pattern. I'm used to the dysfunction. And some of us just don't know what to do to stop this train that we're on toward monotony and toward routine and toward that feeling every day of that I'm not doing what I know I'm called to do, and I'm not making a difference in the world in the area where I know that I can make a difference. So there are really 5 things that I want to share with you, 5 must-haves, and they all start with P. 5 must-haves for major life change. If you don't have these 5 things, it's just not going to happen. No matter how much you hope, no matter how much you wish, no matter how much you pray, without these 5 things, life change is not going to happen. Major life change is not going to happen. So number 1, in the 5 must-haves for life change, you need passion. You need an intrinsic desire to actually change in the area that you know needs to change. And the reason why you need passion is because if you're not passionate about the area that needs to change, when you hit a roadblock the first time, when you hit that roadblock and you're not passionate about it, you're just going to revert. And sometimes you end up being worse than you were before you started the process of change. So if you're not passionate about weight loss, when you hit that first day where the weather is cold outside, or all the people are on the machines at the gym that you want to use, or you just don't feel like getting up in the morning, when you hit that first day and you're not passionate about it, eventually you stop going to the gym, you start working out, you stop watching your weight and your diet because you don't have a passion. You don't have that intrinsic motivation. If you don't have a passion about writing a book and you think it's just something good to do or a way to make some passive income, but you're not passionate about it, the first time you hit writer's block, the first time the editor destroys your manuscript, the first time that you have some challenges with your graphic designer, or you can't get your PayPal cart to work effectively with your website so people can make purchases. When you hit those roadblocks, sometimes you just leave the project by the wayside because you don't have that intrinsic motivation to keep going. So ask yourself, the areas where you know that you need to make changes, are you passionate about those areas? And I suggest starting with the areas that you have the most passion about, because that passion, that intrinsic motivation, that inner desire to change will help carry you when you hit those rough patches. Number 2 is you need a plan. You need a plan. Nothing happens haphazardly. You can't stumble your way through major life change. You need a plan. And some of you are listening to this and saying, okay, maybe you don't understand. I'm not good at planning. Well, find somebody who's good at planning. Everybody on social media is an entrepreneur and trying to build their business around something. And some people are building their life around organizing, around planning, around coaching. Connect with those individuals. Maybe there's somebody in your family who's a project manager or who's worked in strategic planning. Put yourself out there to ask for somebody to help you put a plan together. You don't build a house unless you got a plan. You don't go to war unless you have a plan. Well, you shouldn't. You shouldn't build a house. You shouldn't go to war unless you have a plan. Without a plan, your chances of success are little to none. So you need passion and you need a plan. Another thing you need are pom-poms. Well, not literal pom-poms. If you want some of those, maybe you could go to Dollar Tree or some party store and get some pom-poms. But for pom-poms, I'm really talking about this idea of having cheerleaders, of having people in your corner to support you and to encourage you. Some people to inspire you. They're really to motivate you on this journey, who are always going to just be pouring encouragement into you and who will support you in this area of life change. So we got passion, we got plans, we got pom-poms, which are cheerleaders, encouragers in your corner. But you also need a prod. This is an accountability partner or accountability partners. You need some people who are going to hold your feet to the fire and say, hey, let's get this done. Some people who you say you're going to work out every morning at 6. If they live in your neighborhood, they're knocking on your door at 5:50 saying, get up. Some people who you said you're watching your diet, who are going to hold you accountable, who are going to ask you for a review of what you've eaten that week. Some individuals, when you said you want to write a book, they're going to call you every week and say, hey, let's talk about this book. Share with me what you've written. You need those people to hold you accountable. Why? Because you let yourself off the hook every single time. You need somebody like a prod, a cattle prod, to get motivates cattle to keep moving. And it's not always comfortable, but it gets them going in the right direction. Number 5, you need persistence. You need a stick-to-itiveness. You need this resolve to say, I'm going to keep going on those tough days. Now, you said, well, what about passion? Well, passion is the desire to keep going. Persistence is the actual process of keeping going. I don't know if keeping going, I know all my grammar police are going to get upset because you're not supposed to say keeping going, but I just said it. All right. And I'm not going to edit it out. Passion is that desire. Persistence is the action of continuing to do what you have desired or what you've purposed to do. You need that persistence. You need that stick-to-itiveness. When you look at achievement methods, achievement assessments today, though the individuals that achieve the most are usually, for the most part, are not the people who are the strongest or the smartest or the most attractive or the most resourced. They're the individuals who persist. They're the individuals who keep going. So if you want to experience major life change, you need passion, you need a plan, you need some pom-poms, some cheerleaders, you need a prod, some accountability partners, and you need some persistence. And hey, prayer won't hurt you either. As a Christian, I believe in the power of faith to transform lives. So throw some prayer in that, and that would be your 6 must-haves for life change. Hey, and that's all I got for this episode of the Leading While Green podcast. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation today, and I hope you stay connected. We'll be releasing this podcast about once a week, and we're here to help you. I'm here, and my guests will be here to help you live, to help you learn, to help you lead with confidence. And we hope that you stay with us on this ride. Check out my blog, pierreCquinn.com, for more information, leadership tips and updates on what's happening in my life. And leave us a review. Leave me a review and leave my guests when they come a review on iTunes, and support us. Check out my books, Leading While Green, Revision. You can check those out on my blog. And check out the Revision Conference. We want you in the building. Revision2017.eventbrite.com. And until next time, take care and God bless.